All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariana. I am the GA for the Carolina Latinx Center and in charge of the Pulso Scholars Program. Thank you so much for participating in our event this afternoon. We are admitting some people. Okay, so we're here with some students from the UNC School of Medicine and from the LMSA, the Latino Medical Student Association, and they're going to chat about taking a gap year. And yeah, I'll hand it over to Holly to get us started.
Hey, my name's Holly. I am a first-year medical student, a member of LMSA, and my role on the LMSA Executive Board is to be the liaison between LMSA and the Pulsos program and the CLC. So very excited to see people virtually. I'm going to take a back seat for most of this panel, but I'm going to ask our med students to introduce themselves in a second. I think most of them are on here, might have somebody else jump on, but med students, if you could say your name, your hometown, your pronouns, your year in school, and then maybe like if you have any interests, or Emilio, I know you matched, so I guess like future direction. Yeah. And then we've got some prepared questions, but CLC students also will give you all an opportunity to ask what you're interested about. We know a lot of people are interested in gap years and what that looks like, but as I'm sure the med students will be happy to answer questions about whatever you're wondering about medical school. So I might just call you off, med students, in the order that you're on my list, so we're not interrupting. Emilio?
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Emilio Guzman Cisneros. I am a fourth year medical student here at UNC. I was born in Mexico, but I've lived in Winston-Salem, North Carolina for most of my life. And now, you know, as a fourth year med student, I'm about to graduate, and I've matched into internal medicine residency at Duke. So I'll be starting that in a couple months. Anything else? Did you say that we should mention?
That sounds great.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Alexa, you're next on my list.
Okay, I'm Alexa. I'm a first year medical student. I'm from Chapel Hill. I lived here pretty much my whole life. I went to undergrad here also. And then I moved to Guatemala for a year and a half and worked there before I came back. And then I did my master's degree at VCU in Richmond in physiology and biophysics. And then now I'm here again.
Michael?
Hey, my name is Michael Botras. I'm a third year here. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I went to UNC for undergrad. And after that, I was off for 3 years with not really as much an intention of going to medical school, but then kind of derailing and midlife crisising my way through those 3 years. I found myself in med school here. I did a postgrad program at NC State as well to prepare myself to get into medical school once I decided to go. And I also worked for the EPA doing public health research in that interim.
Thanks. Santi?
Hey, my name's Santi. I'm a first year and did my undergrad at Duke, but grew up in Florida, was born in Colombia, and took 3 gap years also, and did some public health research with the Duke Cancer Institute, and then worked as an EMT for a while, and then did some more clinical jobs like phlebotomy and as a tech in the ER. And then I did a post-bac at Meredith.
Nick?
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a third year in the medical school, and I'm in the MD PhD program. I did my undergrad at Cornell. After that, I did 2 gap years at the NIH postbac in Bethesda. I did neuroscience research there. And now I'm here, so.
Great. And Andres?
Hey there. Sorry, trying to figure out how Zoom works. My name's Andres Lopez. I'm a fourth year medical student here at UNC. And I graduated from Carolina in 2012 undergrad. I did Teach for America in Memphis, got my master's in pharmacology, and during that gap time, met my wife, which is important. So I spent 5 years before I went back to med school, and now I'm a new fourth year. And shout out to graduated or almost graduated students like Emilio who are out here. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I forgot to mention, I went to undergrad at UNC, majored in chemistry and minored in French, and I had 2 years between graduating and med school. I worked as a outreach and enrollment coordinating, helping people get insured through the ACA, and also as a CNA at a PACE center in Burlington. So that's what I did.
Just matched into Duke internal medicine. Sorry, I'm stoked for you, man. I'm sorry. Congrats to you, man. That's huge.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Ariana, I can get started with a question, and I'm actually going to combine two of our questions because people started speaking to their gap year roles. But I'm just going to ask if people could talk a little bit about what they did during their gap year, and how, including a post-bac program, and how they think that made their application more competitive. And y'all, whoever wants to jump on, you all can fight over the Zoom.
So I did a post-bac in Meredith, and so so pretty much I did a post-bac because I had to. You know, I definitely didn't have the GPA to go into med school. Duke kicked my butt, and so I think I graduated with like a 2.9 science GPA and like a 3.1 or 3.2 overall. So I just I knew that wouldn't cut it just to like push past the filters of med school. So did the post-bac in Meredith as like a GPA booster, and took some courses that actually turned out to be really helpful. So I took anatomy and physiology, which I never got to take at Duke. I took immunology, which turned out to be really helpful. And then I retook physics, which I did poorly on in undergrad. And then during that time, the nice thing about Meredith is, first of all, you could use Perkins, I think like plus loans for it. And so you don't have to pay for it like all out of pocket. Whereas some other post-bacs can get pretty expensive. That's one of like the drawbacks of them. And because it's not a master's program, it still counts towards your undergraduate GPA, which is also something to think about. If you're looking for that grade boost, they both will give you a grade boost. It's just one will count towards your undergrad GPA and one will be a separate master's GPA. But it also left enough time to kind of beef up my clinical experience of volunteering and shadowing during that year.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in on that too. I think, you know, with a grain of salt, I kind of was going through undergrad with like medical school and like healthcare as like in the background, but definitely not as my priority. And because of that, I was like, oh, like I've graduated with a chemistry degree. I had an idea of like, I'm going to work in like R&D and some kind of field of pharmaceuticals. And I had a mindset like my grades really like don't matter as much. Like I just need to make sure I'm completing and learning as much as I can, because chemistry at UNC, you take a hit on some PChem classes for sure. They're very difficult. So I wasn't as concerned about it. And then when I got to the end of my degree, I realized I didn't want to do that. And I had pigeonholed myself into not necessarily having the grades to be as competitive. I think I could have applied, but I wouldn't have really been very successful. And I think that's something you should consider. Like, it's an expensive process to apply to medical school too. So putting yourself in the best position and knowing that you want to, like, you having the best idea that you can of knowing you want to try and pursue this career is very important before you start, like, take a step in. Because once you start going down this road, like, it's a long road. I think all of us agree, like, it's very rewarding, but you're definitely committing yourself to having like some different sacrifices that other of my peers that aren't necessarily doing this aren't committing. But that was what doing the post-bac also afforded me. I did mine at State. I think it was a good way to align whether I would rather want to go down the road of healthcare work, working specifically and going to medical school, or potentially pursuing like solely like a PhD in research route, or any combination of the two. I was able to work as a CNA at the same time that I was doing the post-bac program. It was very doable, and I think it kind of helped me guide my path a little more to knowing I wanted to go to medical school. Hopefully that made sense and wasn't rambling.
So I would probably kind of just reflect most of what other people have said. Although I would add that I had kind of always planned on doing a gap year at least. I've known I wanted to be a doctor since I was like 12, so this wasn't really like a journey of discovering myself so much. But my parents did Peace Corps, and I had always wanted to do something similar. I wanted to live abroad and get actual life experience before I went right back into school. So even if you do have the grades, which I also did not have, so I had to do a post-bac, but if you do have the grades, I would still honestly recommend taking a year off. I think going straight from undergrad to med school, it would be, honestly, I don't think I would have been able to do it. Med school is exhausting. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think I had gotten all of like the partying out of my system that I needed to. I think it's important to know that you're mature enough to go to med school. And I wasn't. So I'm really glad I waited. Definitely some of that was not a choice because as like Santi said, my GPA coming out of UNC was like a 3.3 or something. Science was way worse than that. And I was able to take out loans for my post-bac as well, like government loans. I didn't know that there were some that you couldn't do that with. So if you're considering the one at VCU. And the benefit of that one, I would say also is if you get above a certain MCAT score and above a certain GPA, you get a guaranteed interview at VCU Med School. So that's my plug for that. And also the physiology professor that we study all of our physiology from in med school, it was one of my professors there, and she's awesome. So highly recommend VCU. That's my plug.
So my post-bac was a little bit different. It was an NIH like research-based post-bac. There were no courses or anything. For me, I realized I wanted to do research pretty late in college. Like I joined a lab middle of junior year and then realized, oh, I kind of want to do this additional to medicine. And that was pretty late to then apply to a PhD program without doing some gap time. So for me, to get a little more research experience and figure out how things to really talk about in a resume besides just my undergrad. So yeah, the NIH post-bac was really cool. I liked it a lot. It actually paid me too. You're essentially a lab tech with a little more spin on just education and a program to apply to med school, grad school, that kind of thing. I'll put in a plug too for if you're doing gap time, at least 2 years. And I say that because if you're trying to boost your kind of credentials and talk about what you've done in your gap time, when you apply in like June, July, August, you can't really write about what you're doing in your gap year because you just started it. So having at least a year to write about can be very helpful.
So I did a master's in pharmacology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, which is where the med school is. I finished Teach for America by then. So Teach for America used to give a ton of AmeriCorps money that you could use to pay off prior student loans, or you could use towards master's programs, doctorals, etc. And by that time I'd been in Tennessee for a couple years, so they considered me in state. So I actually ended up not paying for it, which was awesome. And the reason I did it though was because I had been 3 years removed from undergrad and my grades were solid, but I had called up Claudius Polk, who's in the Office of what used to be called Special Populations. And I was like, can you be realistic with me? What are my chances of getting into med school? And he like looked at my grades. He's like, you got a great chance getting med school. You don't have a strong or great chance of getting into Carolina. And he knew that was important to me, to go back home to Carolina and like be at UNC School of Medicine if possible. So I did the master's, and the thing that's different is I think one, it's accelerated, so it's full time. You can't really work a full time job at the same time. It's only 1 year. And then two, it doesn't really do any like remediation of old coursework, except for the first month. The next 11 months are completely new pathology, pathophysiology, pharmacology, journal club, etc. But what I think it really prepared me for was the first year of med school, where like whenever we went over any pathways or pharmacology principles, it was like I had seen it before. And what I was learning was like treatment modalities and other factoids or things. So that's kind of my 2 cents from that. I would also echo the sentiment that like I don't think I was fully mature to go to med school by the time I got out of undergrad. I definitely did enjoy myself in Teach for America a lot, socially and in other ways. So I would highly recommend, if you can, take 2 years just for yourself.
Yeah, and I would just add on that I didn't do a post-bac, but during the time after graduating, I took the MCAT, so I used that time to study for it, and yeah, just spend time with family during those 2 years and just get some life experience like working, and also I would put in a plug for the MED program at UNC, which both Andres and I did. I don't know if anybody else did, but and that I guess we can share that information, distribute it via email to everyone. But essentially, it's a summer program that's very rigorous, and and you get more or less a real life exposure to like a first semester of medical school, and you get taught by former med school professors, some of the current med school professors, and you get to connect with physicians here, and it just really can be a boost to your resume and application for med school. It was for me, and I would highly recommend it.
And to add on to what Emilio says, a lot of students do it between their junior and senior year of college, but a lot of students do it as non-traditional students as well. So this year, 2 years ago, I was a TA, and one of my MED students was a 3-year teacher in Bunlevy County in North Carolina, right? But she knew she wanted to go back to med school. And then if finances is a concern, over the summer, they do give you a stipend, like most medical school summer programs. And so like if your family's finances are concerns, or if you typically work and you need that money, like they do everything in their power to help you get to that program and succeed in that program. And I've actually told all my mentees, my Pulso mentees and non-Pulso mentees, if you are serious about going to medical school, if you're worried about your like application, and if you're a student of color or from a rural background, you have to do the MED program. You don't have to, but that's the way I frame it. I am a huge proponent of it as well. And so shout out to Emilio for bringing that up.
Yeah, I definitely found out about MED too late to do it, because I would have done it after my post-bac. But I think if I would have been considering it at the same time as the post-bac, I would have went with the MED. Like the kids in our class that did it, it was just crazy that first semester how ahead of the game they were. When we took on like really hard blocks or really hard material, they had already seen it once or twice.
Thanks, everybody. Second question, how did you make yourself stand out in a medical school application, especially if you feel like there were things in your application that were maybe not the standard medical student? And I'm sure there are lots of things, but you can pick one thing that you think you did to make yourself stand out.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just anything you think is random and not applicable to medical school can generally be seen as pretty cool. That's putting it in very layman's terms, but like most of the things that were that stood out to my interviewers, not just at UNC, but pretty much any of medical school that I applied to, was nothing related to like my science background or anything. I mean, like loosely, like I did like random things. Like I did a bunch of the public health research I did, like half of it was with bumblebees and honeybees. and like they just wanted to talk to me about how, like, so you were a beekeeper, like that's so cool. How'd you do that? Like educating them about different types of honey. Just random stuff that you think is like only useful for like random trivia is like actually very exciting to a lot of people to talk about. And I think really the biggest thing is showing your engagement in some kind of like of like channeling your drive and your passion of something and being able to show that by explaining what you did and sharing that passion, I think will reflect well, because that's really what they want, is someone who is willing to have that dedication to coming into medicine. So it's not necessarily translating like you need to like love the organic chemistry to understand the drugs that are gonna cure somebody of like, I don't know, coronavirus right now. It's like just being able to have that kind of drive and show you're able to channel it into medicine. If you have the drive, and you'll be able to channel it into medicine.
Yeah, when I got to UNC for my interview, I introduced myself to the program director, and they immediately said, "Oh, you're the singer, right?" They didn't like, yeah, the courses that I took and the grades that I got helped me get here, but when you get an interview, yeah, things you do, like singing or whatever hobby it is that you wrote about in your application, like, is interesting to talk about too.
Yeah, I think by the time you get an interview, generally I think the school thinks that you're academically prepared to take on the coursework, and what they really want to know is whether you fit into their program, and I think some of the things that I put in on my application that stood out, I think was I don't know, it was so long ago, but I play soccer, I danced on a at UNC's Que Rico team, I and to reiterate what Michael was saying, challenge your passion on something. I really didn't do a lot of like volunteer work. I mean, I did, but there was one volunteer activity that I did for 3 years, during undergrad, and that just shows commitment and drive, and that's what they want to see, I think.
And then I know for me, like, because I was telling y'all, like, I knew my GPA was pretty weak. I pretty much like really committed to learning clinical skills. And so I got EMT trained. I worked as EMT for about 1.5 years. And then I worked as a phlebotomist for a while. And then I worked in the emergency room at Duke as a tech. And so I was really like, well, like, I'm definitely not going to have like the GPA or the MCAT score that's going to like put me like above the rest. So like, I'm going to have like more clinical skills than, almost everybody in my class. And so that's kind of what I banked on. And like, that really followed what I've always liked. I've always liked hands-on stuff. I've always like, that's what always pushed me. Like when I first learned a CPR class, I was like, this is amazing. And kind of like pursued that. So I think definitely like pulling on that string of what you love about medicine and having it show up in your application.
I would just kind of agree what everyone else said. It, to some aspect, doesn't really matter what you're doing in those gap years, as long as you're showing A, you're passionate, and B, you're dedicated, because those are two things that ultimately translate to medical school. You have to be passionate, because if not, you're going to get really tired of being in medical school and being a doctor probably. And then you have to be dedicated, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of studying, and then when you get out, it's a lot of keeping up with your credentials, it's a lot of working with patients, it's a lot of like, I don't know. So passion and dedication, and as people have said, you can do that definitely a number of different ways.
I can jump to a question that's in the chat. For CLC students, we have some more questions written, but feel free to send questions you have in the chat. So I don't know if you all can read this, but what would you recommend for a student who was not pre-med as an undergrad, who is looking for a career change post-bac, graduating with double majors in STEM, pre-health minor in career related to allied health. Realized it was not for me. I want to pursue medicine and was wondering which post-bac would be best. And what masters would you recommend, MPH or MS? And so maybe if people can give their insight on that question, and also that kind of ties into something else that we wanted to discuss, which is medicine versus other healthcare careers. So trajectories like MPH or Nick, when it comes around to you, you can tell us.
I'm just going to say something about the MPH versus MS. I think, I mean, I don't have any experience with that, but I think it doesn't necessarily, there's not a right answer for that. It all depends on what your intention is with doing that program, why, the reason behind why you're doing it. If you wanted to do an MPH because you're passionate about population health, and you just want to be better prepared, and have that be part of your career in the future, then that might be the best option for you. But if I think if you want to become stronger from a GPA standpoint, definitely doing a post-bac in I guess I don't know which any of the things that some of these guys have done. I think that's what's most important is the reason why you're doing it rather than what you're doing. So whoever's done an MPH or a post-bac, you guys are the experts.
And I'll be honest, I've never actually understood masters in the gap years, because like your end goal is med school, and so like you won't really get a chance to use that masters. But I guess for like MPH, if UNC is the school you're considering, I like me personally, I would wait till you get to UNC. UNC does have like the best public health school in the country. But yeah, I guess like more towards motive. I think just like my experience in Meredith is that Meredith has like a career change track. And so you could take all your 8 pre-med recs in that 1 year. And so or you take 2 in the summer and then you do 3 each semester. And so honestly, it does leave you still time to do the other things you need to do, like volunteering and stuff. And I think with the funding that was unique to Meredith, or maybe unique to the post-bac in the area, was that you could apply FAFSA to it. And so it's also a little bit more affordable that way. But yeah, Meredith was like, people either came in needing to fix old courses that they got bad grades in, or they were complete career changers and they knocked out the 8 pre-med recs in a year.
So I would just say that I have a slightly different take on the master's thing, obviously, since I did one. But just to say that the reason that I did one was because I had no research experience, and I was told, it was like pretty important to have some of that. So if you don't have any research experience and you did want to get like experience with scientific writing, that's one way to do it. Obviously, you can also just like do a post-bac or an MPH and do research at the same time. But that was my motivation behind doing that. Although I think that probably potentially if it's a career changer one, you might be more limited in kind of your options because you have to take those like prereqs. And then I would also just say in terms of, I guess, more broadly, master's versus MPH, I have found it very beneficial to have done my master's in physiology because it's been really helpful just going into med school and already knowing all of those cell signaling pathways and having gone through all the organs of the body, like in a grad school setting, which is way harder than undergrad, and getting practice with like how you have to study for that. So that was really helpful for me. And then I'm actually someone who does want to do an MPH, but I didn't want to apply to the dual degree. And so if you're really interested in MPH, but you're worried that you know, you need research or whatever, you can actually do your MPH like during residency and stuff like that. So I would just say what I would have told myself when I was younger is that life is a lot longer than it looks like from where you are. And you're going to have all the opportunities to do what you want. So that's what I would say.
Another program we didn't talk about that I think could kind of field this question as well is the postbac at Greensboro, UNCG. I know a lot of people in our med school years, like these last 4 years, have done that. And I can't honestly speak to more about it as to whether it'll like fulfill all the prereqs and stuff like that. But I believe Santi's co-president right now, Luis Acosta, also did it. So if that's something you look up, you're more interested in, I think reaching out to either Santi or myself, we can put you in touch with Luis, and he can tell you more about that program. But I know that also has successfully prepared a lot of students who either had a trajectory change or needed a little bit more coursework.
I'm willing to also say, oh, my bad. Sorry, Holly. I know you're trying to jump in. All right. I was going to say, we probably could each, like, not to give Holly more work, but like send like a little like one-liner about the programs we did. Because like obviously I can't really speak to everyone else's programs. We all did something different. To answer the question, I did NC State. NC State was kind of a broader program where like not everyone was going to go to medical school. There were people who wanted to do PhD programs or people who wanted to go into dental school. There are some people that did very different tracks like anesthesiology assistant school, like very different, some things like that I hadn't really heard of before, and it was a broad track, whereas there are other programs that are built and dedicated much more towards specifically medical school. Maybe something a lot like Alexa's program. I don't want to speak for you, Alexa, but it sounds like that's what it was to a degree. So there's like, if like you definitely want to do medical school, it might be more beneficial to do a program like that versus like if you're kind of going broader and you're just kind of trying to figure out, I don't know if I want to do this, but I feel like healthcare is kind of an area, maybe NC State's a better option. Maybe Greensboro or Meredith have more unique qualities too if you don't have all the pre-med prerequisite courses as well. So we can probably send like little one-liner blurbs to give to Holly about that.
Another question from, oh, and I just put this in the chat, but if people have questions about specific postbac programs, or really if you just have questions about any specific thing that you're thinking about for between now and applying to med school, send me an email about it. There's so many people in our class that I can try to get you connected to somebody who's done it. Another question, any tips for a current student getting ready to apply this cycle? I heard that some people suggest pre-writing secondaries and would love to hear other helpful strategies, suggestions for the process.
I would agree with the pre-writing secondaries thing. I wish I had done that. I certainly didn't. There's quite a number of schools that I ended up not doing my secondary applications for because it was just too long. And I think they say, you know, if it takes you like more than a month between when you get the secondary and submit it, you kind of shouldn't bother submitting it because it shows that you don't care that much. And it takes a long ass time to write those essays. So I would definitely, and I don't think they don't always change between the years, and you can also kind of tweak certain essays to fit into different prompts. So I think it's definitely a good idea to pre-write some secondaries, especially like general ones that you know they're going to ask you about, like leadership stuff or like challenges or stuff like that. Yeah, I wish I had done that.
Yeah, I spent the first about probably 2 weeks of my secondaries just thinking about what challenge to write about. And that could have been pre-written before I got them. So I really wish I did that because that took a lot of time. Secondaries was probably the worst part of the process for me.
So I guess I'll just jump in here because I know when I was applying to med school, I didn't know any of this lingo. So you'll send in a general AMCAS application, and then most schools, without even reading or screening or anything to your application, will send you back within a couple of weeks a secondary application. So your primary application has your personal statement and paragraphs about activities that you want to include in your application. And then the secondary will have somewhere between 1 and 8 more questions about you and that the school wants to know. So that's what people mean when they talk about writing secondaries. Gustavo, it sounds like you already knew that, but for anybody else out there who was as uninformed as I was.
Yeah, and the secondaries can be found online mostly, at least the last year secondaries. And a lot of schools reuse their secondary or do something like very, very similar to it. So that's a way to like rewrite them. And do it somewhere that like you're relaxed. I guess like post MCAT. Like I wrote a lot of mine just like at the beach, like on a journal, and then like transcribed them later just because it was like such a tedious process. But yeah, after a while they start blending together and you could just kind of swap out college names or take a paragraph from one place and the other place.
I also just wanted to say one thing that I don't think I discovered until I was kind of midway through the process. Sorry if this was really obvious for everybody, but there's something called Student Doctor Network, which is like a website online where it's just kind of like a forum where people who are applying like can post things, and a lot of times they'll take this with a grain of salt, take everything on that website with a grain of salt. People kind of lose their minds on there, but it can be really helpful in basically just being a quick way to find what the secondaries from the year before were. They always like start a new thread for each year and they're like, this is what the secondary question was. So that can make it easier for you to find the secondaries. But again, like people go a little bit crazy on that website. So also don't let it freak you out.
Only use that website to find the secondary questions and then get off it immediately. Do not stick around. It will provoke anxiety. Don't do it.
I did not pre-write any secondaries. I didn't know this was something people did. Now I'm looking back on it. I guess it's kind of smart. I didn't apply to many schools, so I didn't realize that would be a smart thing to do. So I guess it kind of also depends on how many schools you apply to. I kind of like seeing them fresh and getting ideas from that. So do whatever works for you.
I think if you do find Student Doctor Network to be like too toxic, I think there's like pre-med HQ or something that also posts them.
Another question, how did you all, or why did you decide on medical school versus other health professional schools? And then maybe speak to why you're doing a dual degree if you are thinking of doing that, or definitely doing that.
So I can start if you want me to talk about that. Yeah, I think a lot of college, I just kind of assumed, oh yeah, medicine, I want to do med school, easy. And then junior year was like, oh, she'll get some research experience, so I'll join a lab and do that for the summer. And then I realized, oh, I actually like this a lot too, and talked to some physician scientists and decided that I kind of wanted to find a way to do both of those things. And you don't necessarily need a PhD to do research. Plenty of MDs do research too, and that's great. For me, I really like basic science, and I did want to do a program that lets me someday have a research program, but also see patients in some way. And that's kind of my goal still. I think it's tricky to find a way to really commit to both medicine and science, and I'm not sure how we'll do that in a career yet, but I have a long time to figure that out. But there are plenty of mentors at UNC that do that, that you can talk to if you're interested in that kind of career path.
Ollie, could you repeat the question?
Why did you choose medicine over other healthcare careers? Or how are you combining medicine and another area of healthcare?
Well, I'll say something. I chose medicine I'm not really sure why, as compared to other careers in healthcare, but I first learned about the healthcare field when I was in high school, and learned about the different careers in it. And I thought, physician was the one that I liked the most, and the ones that seemed most compatible to me. And just to dive deeper into that, I come from a underserved background. A lot of people in my community don't see a physician, and if or suboptimal care. And so I just wanted to become a doctor, to be able to give back to my community, and be a voice and a leader in that community to improve the health of my community. More specifically, I'm interested in working a lot with the Latino community, which is the population that I identify with, and the one that I was raised in. And so that's, the main reason why. I knew it was going to be a tough road ahead. I think I prepared myself. I read some books by physicians that explained the rewarding part, the beautiful part of it, but also the hardships and the struggles that physicians face. And I was like, okay, I think I still want to do it. So I went ahead, and having gone through med school now for 4 years, I love the profession, and I think it's wonderful, but it is it is tough, just like some of those books said, and it can definitely be hard on on your body, on your soul, on your so you just have to be ready for that. And we can talk more about it if someone wants me to elaborate more on that, but
yeah, Emilio, that actually leads really well into another question we got in the chat, and I want to make sure we have time for what's the hardest thing that everybody has had to deal with in medical school. What should we, being pre-med students, be prepared for?
Yeah, I think it can be split up into stages. I think the preclinical years and then the clinical years. So the preclinical years, I think for me, the hardest part was figuring out that time management, and I think just I don't know if by nature, but just I think a lot of us are very driven. We want to just know it all, but the the hardest part was knowing when to stop studying, because you can get just enveloped in that, and you can always keep studying, but I think that the best thing to do is to study smart. You study what you identify what's most important, what's gonna allow you to know the the most important things that are most applicable to patient care and the whole approach to a complaint, but I think that was the toughest part, but I found out that we actually have quite enough time to study and to do other things in our life, like exercise, sleep enough, eat enough and well, and also engage in the things that that you're passionate about. We all came in knowing that, or with something in mind that we were passionate about, and so you can still keep doing that. You can learn, all that you need to know, and also keep doing the things you're passionate about. For me, it was volunteering, and then and then on the clinical aspect, the toughest part is it is the encounters with your patients, because you really you do become their their providers. You're their doctor. Even though you're a student, you're their doctor, and you learn to take on that that responsibility, that privilege of being a physician, and 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 your patients confiding in you things that they would never tell anyone else, and some of those are traumatic experiences, from a emotional, psychological perspective, and that can be hard to deal with. You also see just physical trauma that you experience, and the things that happen to your patient, and that can have just a huge effect on your emotional well-being, and in a way, I think, well, for me, I think I've become a little bit. I think I don't know if it's like I have the experience, but you sometimes hear about like this thing called burnout. I don't think I've ever had burnout, but certainly I've had times when I'm just struggling, just emotionally, mentally, because of the things that I see with my patients. And so I think you should expect that there will be trauma, and it doesn't mean that this is it's going to be like horrible, or it's going to destroy you, but it will change the way you see just how, I guess, what disease means, what health means to you and to your patients. So, and you will see people die, and that's tough. So, and one of the hardest things for me was seeing people die. I actually saw someone die out in public. It was a vehicle accident. I was there, and being someone who's I had gotten my advanced life support ACLS training, and I just felt obligated to help. So and unfortunately, this person just had severe trauma and passed away on the scenes, and on the streets. And so that's one of the toughest things that I've experienced. Anyone else?
Man, you make it so easy to follow up, Emilio. But no, I'll agree that after having finished my third year, I will agree one of the toughest things is kind of figuring out how to cope and internalize, and also what to do with the information your patients provide you, as well as when a patient passes, how to be there for their family. And it's particularly difficult, I think, a bit more during med school than it is perhaps when you're a full physician, because during medical school, you have this kind of awkward, you're half a doctor, a quarter doctor, but not really. You have responsibility, but not really. You have some answers, but not really. And that makes it very difficult to talk with patients and their families about certain outcomes or certain things, um, especially when you're playing this dual role as a medical student who gets to be very intimately, who gets to intimately understand the dynamics of a family and who someone is, but also a healthcare professional. And I think that's hard. Another thing that Emilio touched on that I think is pretty important to speak to y'all about is kind of your background, where you come from. So similar to Emilio, you know, underserved, like I'm from Hendersonville, which is actually, it has more physicians per capita than most of the average North Carolina places. But the Latino community here is dramatically underserved. And coming from a underserved background here in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and a low income background, going into med school the third year, the first time for me was culture shock. And when I taught, all my teachers were teachers of color. My co-teachers were teachers of color. My administrator were people of color. And so I think it was my first time interacting with a very, like, lot of money interacting, lot of hierarchy in the hospital or in clinics, and a lot of white culture. And I found that to be particularly difficult. Like, I'll be honest, I wasn't ready to talk about Game of Thrones or kombucha or the microbreweries in Nashville or things like that, right? And those are things that get discussed in the hospital. Those are things that like are like just discussed in general. And I was like, wow, I don't know. It was just something that was difficult for me, and it took me most of the year to get through. And so understanding your background may affect the way that you come into a medical space and what that looks like and how you interact with it. And that's a whole intangible thing that I never thought was going to give me trouble third year. And it gave me a lot of trouble for some reason. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think just to try and be short along that, I think a lot of it is you find that medical school will push you in your limits in a lot of different ways. You're going to be pushed to learn faster and know more, and then also be pushed to understand when you don't know things. You're going to be in an environment where there's just a lot of people who are a lot very type A. Even at UNC, I think UNC does a really good job of keeping people who are pretty well balanced, but you're still in an environment of people that, you know, to be able to get into be on a track like this, you kind of have to have a similar personality and mindset in that regard to some degree. I think as stress kind of builds, I think that puts a lot of pressure on yourself and the people around you, and that can lead to you having to deal with you're doing a lot more like managing in uncomfortable and awkward situations, like in a more rapid pace, I think, and in an uncomfortable environment like the hospital, where you're starting to learn like what medicine's like. So a lot of that, I think, tied with what Emilio and Andres have spoken to, is, you know, really coming to terms a lot with being brave enough to kind of go in, putting in the best effort that you can, understanding that you're gonna make a lot of mistakes and not know a lot of things, and being humble in the fact that while you are definitely smart enough to be here, have worked hard to get here, and are able to learn everything you need to learn over time, you're going to be hitting a lot of roadblocks, and that is okay. That's all part of the process. So let your ego get hit, let your self-esteem kind of take a little bruising, but I think coming out on the other end of that, you're going to be not only a better person in your career, but just a better person overall.
I think one of the things that was hardest for me at first, but definitely still hasn't like gone away completely, is imposter syndrome. So feeling like everyone else around you is better than you, and you're not actually supposed to be here, and they made a mistake, and that's hard to get over, honestly, or at least it was for me. And you know, just knowing that they chose you for a reason, and you're here and you can do it, and even when it's hard, it doesn't mean that you're not cut out for this. I think is important, and really, really trying not to compare yourself to your classmates and your friends, especially for me, that's hard. A lot of my friends are like our class presidents and stuff, and I'm like, ah. But yeah, I would say that that was difficult for me. And then just kind of generally, if you can try to figure out what your learning style is before you get into med school, that would probably help you a lot, because I would say that a very large part of it was just me trying to figure out how to study for each unit. Which, yeah, I mean, each unit is different, but if you know that you're a visual learner, then you can start out using tools like Sketchy. And when you get into med school, people will tell you all of the gajillion different study tools that you have. But that's one piece of advice I would say. If you can figure that out beforehand, that's definitely helpful.
Or at least be open to trying new strategies once you get to med school. Yeah, and that's about all I'd say for that. It was a hard transition, especially for me. I hadn't taken courses in 2 years. So getting back into like, how do I study again was not as easy as I thought it would be. So yeah, and also plugging for not comparing yourself to your friends, because everyone had a different background and learned different things before they got here. So you're here for a reason.
All right, so again, thank you so much, and thank you for our attendees as well. As you all know, we're recruiting for our second Pulso Scholars cohort. And for myself, as someone who is putting this all together, it's really useful to hear from our panelists, our current medical students, because these are a lot of the questions that our students have, and people who are interested in the program, and what type of events can we do to help our undergraduates as well with at the CLC. So yeah, again, thank you. Thank you for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and yeah, have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up. And, you know, I'll be at Duke for residency, so I'm always happy to, you know, mentor any students, you know, so yeah, I mean, I think I can give out my information, and you can keep it for others to contact me. So.
Awesome. Thank you.